The massive space station hung like a silver jewel against the stars. It was bigger than most moons, its surface covered with towers that reached toward space. This was the heart of Council, home to the 12 most powerful species in the galaxy. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked down the long hallway toward the main chamber. Her boots clicked against the smooth floor. The walls were made of crystal that showed images of 1,000 different worlds. Each world belonged to the Galactic Council. Elena had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now. She had learned to hide her feelings when dealing with aliens. But today was different. Today the Council would make their final demand. The doors opened before her. The chamber was huge, with a ceiling so high she could barely see it. 12 platforms floated in the air, each one holding a different alien species. They looked down at her like gods judging a mortal. High Arbiter Zekthari spoke first. He was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Ambassador Vasquez, you have come to hear our final offer. Elena stood straight and looked up at him. I'm here to listen, but Earth's position hasn't changed. A sound like laughter came from the moth-like creature on another platform. The seraphim were beautiful but cold. Their leader, Council Wing Thessa, spread her silver wings. Your position. How amusing. You speak as if humanity has a choice in this matter. We always have a choice, Elena said. The ethereal delegate was next to speak. They looked like floating jellyfish made of light. Their words appeared in Elena's mind rather than her ears. For 300 cycles we have maintained order, peace, prosperity. Then your species arrived and disrupted everything. Elena wanted to laugh. Peace? She had read the reports. The Council's idea of peace meant total control. Any species that joined them gave up their freedom. They became workers, soldiers, or slaves. Nothing more. We didn't disrupt anything, she said. We just refused to bow down. This time the laughter was real. It came from General Krax, leader of the warrior race called the Krogan. He was huge and covered in thick armor. His race had served the Council for over 1,000 years as their military force. Refused to bow, Krax growled. You are one small species on the edge of nowhere. We are 12 species that rule 2 million worlds. Yet you act like you matter. Elena felt her anger rising but kept her voice calm. Every thinking being matters. That's what you don't understand. High Arbiter Zekthari's crystal body glowed brighter. Understanding is not required. Only obedience. Your species has colonized 47 systems without our permission. You have established trade routes that ignore our authority. You have even begun to influence other species with your ideas. The last word was spoken with disgust. Elena knew what ideas they meant. Freedom, self-government, the right to choose your own path among the stars. Those aren't crimes, Elena said. They're rights. Rights? Council Wing Thessa's wings fluttered with amusement. Rights are what we grant to those who serve us. You have been given no rights because you have chosen not to serve. Elena looked around at all 12 delegates. Each one represented a species that had once been free. Now they all served the same master, the Council itself. She wondered if they even remembered what freedom felt like. Let me be clear, she said. Humanity will not join the Council as servants. We won't give up our independence. We won't stop exploring new worlds, and we won't stop offering other species a choice. The chamber fell silent. Elena could hear her own heartbeat in the quiet. Finally, High Arbiter Zekthari spoke. Then you have chosen extinction. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. 6 times before we have made this offer to young species, the ethereal continued in her mind. 6 times they refused. 6 times their civilizations ceased to exist. General Krax leaned forward on his platform. The Valenti thought they were special too. Their homeworld is now an asteroid field. The Nexari believed they could hide in the dark between stars. We found them. The Korthak tried to fight us. He smiled, showing sharp teeth. Their children's children don't even remember their true names. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had read about these lost civilizations. Humanity had found ruins and broken records scattered across the galaxy. They had always wondered what happened to these species, now she knew. You have 30 standard days, Zekthari announced. Submit completely to Council authority or face total destruction. Every human world, every human ship, every human life. All will end, Elena wanted to argue. Part of her wanted to beg. The Council had the power to do exactly what they threatened. Their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands. Their weapons could crack planets in half, but she was human. And humans didn't beg. I need to return to Earth to deliver your message, she said. Of course, Council Wing Thessa said sweetly. We want your people to understand exactly what they face. Fear makes the final surrender so much easier. Elena turned and walked toward the door. Behind her, she could hear the delegates talking among themselves. They sounded pleased, confident. They had done this before and they knew how it would end. The doors closed behind her with a sound like a tomb, sealing shut. Elena walked quickly back to her ship. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. She had a message to deliver to Earth, but it wasn't the one the Council expected. The communication system came online as her ship cleared the station. Elena entered her personal code and waited for the connection to reach Earth. It would take several minutes for the signal to travel across space. Priority Alpha, she said into the microphone. Authorization Vasquez 779. Message begins. The Council has made their final offer. We have 30 days. Activate Protocol 0. Repeat, activate Protocol 0. Message ends. She cut the connection and sat back in her pilot's chair. Through her window, she could see the heart of Council growing smaller as she flew away. Soon it was just another star in the darkness. Elena smiled for the first time in hours. The Council thought they knew humanity. They thought they understood how humans would react to threats and fear. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 50 years ago, when humans first learned they weren't alone in the universe, they had started making plans. Not just plans for exploration or trade. Plans for war. Plans for survival. Plans for the day when some alien empire would demand their freedom or their lives. That day had finally come. Elena's ship jumped into hyperspace, carrying her back toward Earth. Behind her, the Council prepared for another easy victory over another young species that didn't know its place. They had no idea that humanity had been preparing for this fight since the day they first looked up at the stars. The war hadn't started yet, but humanity was already 50 years ahead. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center buried deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's moon. The room was filled with screens showing star maps, ship positions, and communication channels. Officers moved quietly between the displays, their faces serious. Signal received from Ambassador Vasquez, reported Lieutenant Park. Protocol 0 is active. Chen nodded. She had been waiting for this message for 3 years. Ever since the Council first made contact with humanity, Earth's military leaders had been planning for this moment. Send the activation codes, Chen ordered. All units, all stations, all operatives. It's time. Across human space, the message was received. On Mars, the defense fleet began what looked like a panicked retreat toward Earth. On the colony worlds, civilian ships packed with families fled toward the outer rim. Military bases sent desperate calls for reinforcements that would never come. To any observer, it looked exactly like what the Council expected, a young species falling apart under pressure. But Chen knew better. She watched the tactical display as thousands of small ships left human space through hidden routes. These weren't refugees running from the war. They were humanity's true weapon, spreading out across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. How many years have we been placing our people? She asked her intelligence chief, Colonel Martinez. 23 years since we started the deep cover program, Martinez replied. We have operatives on over 300 Council worlds. Scientists, traders, engineers, even some in their military academies. Chen smiled grimly. The Council saw humans as primitive newcomers. They never suspected that those helpful human mechanics and eager human students were actually trained intelligence agents. And our special cargo? Delivered to target sites across 12 sectors, waiting for activation. The special cargo was humanity's real secret. For 2 decades, Earth's best scientists had been working on a project that officially didn't exist. They called it the Liberation Protocol. Dr. Sarah Kim had started it all. She was an archaeologist who spent her time digging through ruins of dead civilizations. 3 years ago, she had made a discovery that changed everything. Kim walked into the command center now carrying a data tablet. She looked tired but excited. Admiral, we've confirmed the data from the Nexari ruins matches what we found on the Korthak worlds, she said. The pattern is the same. Every extinct species shows signs of the same neural modifications. Chen turned to face her. Explain it in simple terms, Doctor. Kim touched her tablet and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed a brain scan of an alien species. Every Council race shows evidence of genetic tampering, Kim said. Their brains have been changed, modified. The sections that control independent thought, creativity, and rebellion have been reduced or removed entirely. They're slaves, Martinez said quietly. Worse than slaves, Kim replied. Slaves know they're not free. These species don't even remember what freedom feels like. The modifications are passed down through their genes. Each generation becomes more obedient than the last. Chen stared at the hologram. All of them? Every council species we've examined. The proud Krogan were once galaxy-spanning conquerors. The wise ethereals used to be philosophers and poets. The seraphim had individual personalities and dreams. And now they're tools, living weapons and computers in the shape of their original species. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the command center continued its work. Officers tracked council fleet movements. Communication specialists decoded alien signals. Technicians monitored the hidden human ships spreading across the galaxy. What about the original 12? Chen asked. The founding species of the council? Kim's expression grew dark. That's the real secret, Admiral. I don't think they're dead. I think they're still here pulling the strings. On the main screen, new reports were coming in. The Council's war fleet was massive beyond belief. 50,000 ships of the line, 500 dreadnoughts capable of destroying entire fleets, and at the center of it all the World Killer, a weapon the size of a moon that could crack planets apart. They're not taking any chances, Lieutenant Park observed. This is the biggest fleet in recorded history. Good, Chen said. The bigger they are, the more chaos we can cause. The Council fleet was already moving toward human space. Their progress was slow but steady. They stopped at supply bases and communication hubs along the way, confident in their overwhelming power. They didn't notice the small technical problems that began occurring behind them. Navigation beacons started broadcasting incorrect data. Automated defense platforms began treating Council ships as unknown contacts. Supply convoys reported equipment failures and missing cargo. Each problem was small by itself, the kind of minor issue that happened in any large organization, but taken together, they began to disrupt the careful logistics that kept the Council war machine running. Dr. Kim worked at her tablet while Chen watched the fleet movements. Are you sure this will work? The Admiral asked. The Liberation Protocol is based on their own technology, Kim replied. We found the original control systems in the ruins, the same systems they used to modify their subject species. But we've reversed the process, and our people are in position. Colonel Martinez nodded. Every major council world has at least 3 deep cover operatives. They're ready to activate the protocol on your command. Chen thought about the young humans who had spent years pretending to be simple traders and workers. Many of them had been living false lives for so long they barely remembered their real names. When the protocol activated, they would become targets. Most would probably die, but they had volunteered for this mission. They knew the cost. Time until the Council fleet reaches Earth? Chen asked. 14 days at current speed, Park replied. Chen nodded. The timing would be tight, but it could work. The Council expected humanity to fight a traditional war, fleet against fleet, weapon against weapon. They thought the outcome was certain. They had no idea that humanity had spent 50 years learning a different kind of warfare. Not the kind fought with ships and guns, but with information and ideas. The most dangerous weapon in the universe wasn't a planet killer or a star destroyer. It was the simple concept that every thinking being deserved to be free, and humanity was about to remind the galaxy what that concept could do. Send word to all units, Chen ordered. Phase 1 is complete. Prepare for Phase 2. She looked up at the main screen where the massive Council fleet continued its slow advance toward Earth. Let them come, she thought. Let them bring their biggest guns and strongest ships. Humanity was ready to show them what real war looked like. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin, but the real fight wouldn't be decided by weapons or numbers. It would be decided by the power of a single idea, that freedom was worth any price. The first attacks on Earth were exactly what the Council expected. Human ships flew out to meet the massive alien fleet, firing their primitive weapons and screaming defiant messages across space. They fought bravely but uselessly against overwhelming numbers. High Arbiter Zekthari watched from his command ship as human vessels exploded one by one. Their technology was crude. Their tactics were desperate. In 6 hours of battle, they had destroyed perhaps 12 Council ships while losing over 300 of their own. It will be over soon, General Krax reported from his battlecruiser. The humans fight with courage but no skill. Their weapons cannot even penetrate our shields. Zekthari felt satisfied. This was how it always went. The young species would make one desperate attack, be crushed, then surrender. Soon humanity would be begging for mercy. But then the reports started coming in from across Council space. High Arbiter, his communications officer said. We're receiving strange messages from the inner systems. What kind of messages? Communication disruptions, sir, and something else. The main screen flickered to life. Instead of the battle around Earth, it now showed a human woman standing in what looked like a vast chamber filled with ancient artifacts. Citizens of the galaxy, the woman said. Her voice was calm and clear. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I am speaking to you from the sacred chamber of the First Council, on the holy world of Zarthak Prime. Zekthari felt something he hadn't experienced in 1,000 years. Surprise. Zarthak Prime was the most heavily guarded world in Council space. No unauthorized person had ever set foot in the sacred chamber. Your leaders have lied to you for 3,000 years, Vasquez continued. What you are about to see is the true history of the Galactic Council. The artifacts around her began to glow. Ancient recording devices activated, filling the chamber with holographic displays. Images that showed events from long ago when the galaxy was young. The Council was not formed to bring peace, Vasquez said. It was created by 12 species who had already conquered and destroyed over 200 others. The holograms showed the truth. Ancient wars fought not for territory or resources, but for the complete elimination of entire civilizations. Worlds burned to ash, species wiped from existence, knowledge and culture destroyed forever. Across Council space, billions of beings watched in shock as their entire understanding of history crumbled. But worse was still to come. The member races you know today are not the original species, Vasquez continued. They are the survivors who were deemed useful enough to preserve. But they were changed, modified, turned into perfect servants. New holograms appeared, showing the genetic laboratories where proud species had been transformed into obedient tools. The process was slow and careful, done over many generations so the victims never realized what was happening to them. On his command ship, General Krax stared at the screen with growing confusion. The images showed his own people, the Krogan, but they looked different. Proud, independent, free. The original Krogan Empire once ruled half the galaxy, Vasquez explained. They were explorers and philosophers, builders of great cities and beautiful art, until the First Council decided they were too dangerous to remain free. More images showed the genetic modifications. How the Krogans' natural curiosity was replaced with simple aggression. How their complex society was reduced to a military hierarchy. How their rich culture was stripped away until only the desire to fight remained. Similar displays showed the other Council races. The Seraphim had once been individuals with their own dreams and goals, not the hive-minded servants they were now. The Ethereals had been passionate, artists and musicians before being turned into living. Computers, every Council species had been changed, modified, enslaved, in ways so subtle they never even knew it had happened. Council Wing. Tessa felt something stirring deep in her mind. Memories that should not exist. Images of Seraphim flying free between the stars, creating songs that could make entire worlds weep with beauty. She pushed the memories away. They were impossible. The Seraphim had always served the Council. They had always been loyal workers in the great machine of galactic civilization. But the memories kept coming. And the worst part, Vasquez continued, is that the original 12, the true rulers, they never died. They transcended physical form millennia ago. They still rule from the shadows, pulling the strings of their puppet species. Zekthari felt his crystal body begin to shake. The memories were breaking through now. Memories of a time before the crystalline form, when his people had bodies of flesh and dreams of their own. He remembered the laboratory where he had been changed. The scientists who explained that it was an honor to serve the greater good. The slow transformation that had stripped away everything he had once been. And he remembered the beings who had ordered it all. Creatures of pure thought and malice who saw entire civilizations as nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. The transmission continued for another hour. More evidence, more revelations, more truth than the galaxy had heard in 3,000 years. By the time it ended, Council space was in chaos. On 1,000 worlds, the modified species began to remember who they had once been. The genetic locks that had kept them obedient for millennia started to break down. Warriors turned on their commanders. Workers abandoned their posts. Scientists began asking questions they had been programmed never to think. The Seraphim were the first to break completely free. Their hive mind shattered as individual personalities reasserted themselves. For the first time in 3,000 years, they flew not where they were ordered, but where they chose to go. The Krogan followed soon after. Their simple military structure collapsed as genetic memories of their true heritage flooded back. They remembered being explorers, not just soldiers. They remembered having families and homes and purposes beyond endless war. Even the ethereals began to change. Their computer-like efficiency gave way to emotion and creativity they had thought lost forever. But the rebellion came at a cost. Across council space, the infrastructure began to collapse. Transport systems failed. Communication networks went dark. Entire sectors fell into anarchy as the species that had run them for centuries suddenly remembered they had never chosen to serve. High Arbiter Zekathari stood on his command ship, watching his empire tear itself apart. The attack on Earth was forgotten. Half his fleet was in open revolt. The other half was too confused to follow orders. And deep in his crystalline mind he felt something awakening, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Fear, not fear of death or defeat, but fear of the beings who had created him, the original 12 who still lurked somewhere in the darkness between dimensions. They would not allow their empire to crumble without a fight. Even now he could feel their attention turning toward the chaos. Ancient powers that had slept for centuries were beginning to wake up. The real war was just beginning. And humanity had just turned the entire galaxy into a battlefield where the only prize was the right to be free. The awakening was not gentle. Across council space, beings who had lived for centuries as obedient servants suddenly found themselves flooded with memories of who they had once been. The pain was overwhelming. 3,000 years of suppressed dreams, hopes, and desires crashed into minds that had been shaped to hold only simple thoughts. Some could not handle the shock. Entire populations fell into madness as they tried to reconcile their true selves with what they had become. Others turned to rage, destroying everything around them in their fury at what had been stolen from them. But many simply wept. Council Wing Thessa sat alone in her private chambers aboard her command ship, her silver wings wrapped around her body like a cocoon. The memories kept coming in waves. She remembered her real name, Lyrai. She remembered flying through nebulae for the simple joy of it, creating songs from the stellar wind that could make entire fleets of her people dance among the stars. She remembered having children. Individual children with their own names and dreams, not just identical workers produced in the breeding facilities. All of it stolen. All of it lost. Around her ship, the Seraphim fleet was falling apart. Some vessels flew in random directions as their crews struggled with recovered memories. Others simply hung dead in space as their pilots curled up and refused to move. It was the same throughout council space. The Krogan homeworlds were in complete chaos as warriors remembered they had once been builders and poets. The ethereal computation centers went silent as living computers tried to remember what it felt like to have emotions. But the worst chaos was on Earth itself. Admiral Chen watched from her underground command center as the council fleet began to tear itself apart. Ships that had been advancing in perfect formation suddenly opened fire on each other. Navigation systems sent vessels crashing into asteroids. The massive world-killer weapon began charging its planet-cracking beam, but instead of aiming at Earth, it pointed toward empty space. "It's working," Lieutenant Park said with amazement. "Their entire fleet structure is collapsing." But Chen was not celebrating yet. She knew this was only the beginning. The puppet species breaking free was part of the plan, but they were not the real enemy. "Colonel Martinez," she called. "Report from our deep cover operatives." Martinez looked grim. 30% casualty rate so far. The chaos is making it hard for them to extract. But they've completed their primary missions. The primary missions had been simple but crucial. For 20 years, human agents had been planting small devices throughout council infrastructure, not weapons or explosives, but something far more dangerous. Transmitters that could broadcast the liberation protocol directly into the genetic code of any species that received it. Dr. Kim worked frantically at her console. The protocol is spreading faster than we expected, she reported. The modifications the Council made to their subject species included enhanced communication abilities. They're inadvertently helping us spread the signal, Chen nodded. It was a weakness humanity had discovered in the ruins of extinct civilizations. The Council always improved the communication systems of their subjects to make them easier to control. But the same systems that could send orders could also send freedom. Then the temperature in the command center dropped by 20 degrees in an instant. Emergency lights began flashing. The main screens flickered and went dark. A low humming sound filled the air like the universe itself was groaning under some immense weight. "What's happening?" Chen demanded. Dr. Kim's face went white as she checked her instruments. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout Council space. Power levels I've never seen before." On her screen, star maps showed 12 specific locations suddenly blazing with impossible amounts of energy. Worlds that had been dark and dead for millennia were coming back to life. "The original 12, Kim whispered. "They're waking up." The humming grew louder. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist around the command center. Through the thick walls of the lunar facility, Chen could hear something that should have been impossible. Voices speaking in languages that had been dead for millions of years. Then High Arbiter Zekthari's image appeared on the main screen. But he looked different now. The crystal structure of his body was cracking, revealing something organic underneath. His eyes, which had been empty for centuries, now burned with desperate intelligence. "Admiral Chen," he said, his voice carrying across the light years in real time through methods that should not exist. "You have made a terrible mistake." Chen stood and faced the screen. "We've set your people free." "How is that a mistake?" Zekthari's form continued to change as his true nature reasserted itself. "Free? You think this is freedom? You have awakened beings who ruled this galaxy when your sun was still a cloud of dust. They slept only because their empire was running smoothly. Now that it is threatened, they return." The humming reached a crescendo. Then, silence. New images appeared on screens throughout human space. Ancient beings of impossible size and power emerging from hidden dimensions. They had no fixed form. Sometimes they looked like twisted versions of familiar species. Sometimes like geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Sometimes like pure darkness that consumed light itself. These were the original 12. The founding species that had conquered the galaxy, and then transcended physical existence to rule it more efficiently. They had been content to work through their modified servants for millennia. But now their perfect system was falling apart. The being that had once been called the First Architect spoke directly into the minds of every living creature in Council space. Its voice was like the death of stars. "Rebellion will not be tolerated," it said. "Order will be restored." Reality began to change around the 12 ancient worlds. Space itself bent to their will. Time moved differently in their presence. The laws of physics became mere suggestions that could be ignored when convenient. The awakened Council species tried to fight back. But what could they do against beings that could rewrite the fundamental forces of nature? Krogan fleets fired their weapons and watched the energy beams simply cease to exist. Seraphim tried to flee but found that space itself had become a cage around them. Entire star systems began to change. Planets that had supported billions of free beings were transformed into sterile manufacturing centers overnight. Species that had just remembered their true names found their minds being wiped clean again, this time more thoroughly than before. Admiral Chen watched the reports flow in and felt humanity's first real moment of doubt. They had planned for many possibilities, but not for enemies that could ignore the laws of reality itself. "Dr. Kim," she said quietly, "tell me you have something. Some weakness we can exploit." Kim was working frantically, her fingers flying over her console. "I'm analyzing the energy patterns. There has to be something. No being is truly unlimited, no matter how powerful they seem." But as she worked, more reports came in. The rebellion was failing. The awakened species were being forced back into slavery one by one. Soon the original 12 would turn their attention to the source of the disruption. Soon, they would come for Earth. Chen looked around the command center at her officers. They had known this was a possibility. They had always understood that fighting an empire this old and powerful might require the ultimate sacrifice. "Signal all human colonies," she ordered. "Activate the Prometheus Protocol." Martinez looked shocked. "Admiral, that's irreversible. Once we activate it, there's no going back." "There was never any going back," Chen replied. From the moment we decided to fight for freedom instead of accepting slavery, we were committed to this path. She turned to face the main screen, where images of the original 12 continued their work of reconquest. Dr. Kim, how long until the Prometheus protocol can be activated? 6 hours for the initial phase. But Admiral, the risks. I know the risks, Doctor. I also know what happens if we do nothing. Chen looked around the room one more time. Every human in this facility, every human in the colonies, every human on Earth was about to change in ways that no one could predict. But they would change as free beings, not as slaves. Begin the activation sequence, Chen ordered. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity really is. Deep beneath the lunar surface, machines that had been built in secret over 5 decades began to hum with power. Humanity was about to make one final throw of the dice. Either they would win their freedom, or they would die as themselves. Both options were better than slavery. The change began slowly. Admiral Chen felt it first as a warmth spreading through her chest. It was like standing in sunlight after years of darkness. Around the Lunar Command Center, her officers looked up from their stations with wonder on their faces. I can feel everything, Lieutenant Park whispered. His eyes were bright with tears. Every human in the solar system, every human in the colonies. We're all connected. Dr. Kim monitored the process from her console. The Prometheus protocol is working exactly as designed. Neural pathways are expanding. Consciousness is becoming networked. But everyone is maintaining their individual identity. This was humanity's final secret. While they had spent decades studying the Council's genetic modifications, they had also been working on something entirely different. Not the forced evolution that created slaves, but voluntary transcendence that preserved everything that made a person human. The original 12 had gained power by throwing away their compassion, their individuality, their connections to others. Humanity was doing the opposite, becoming more than human by becoming more connected, more empathetic, more alive. Chen could feel it happening to herself. Her awareness expanded beyond the command center, beyond Luna, beyond Earth itself. She could sense every human consciousness joining the growing network, billions of minds linked together, each one unique but part of something greater. And with that connection came power. Not the reality-warping force that the original 12 wielded, but something far more dangerous. The combined will and determination of an entire species that refused to surrender. The first sign of change came when the Council fleet attacking Earth suddenly stopped firing. The ships hung motionless in space as their modified crews felt the liberation protocol reach them at last. But this time, the signal was being carried not by hidden transmitters but by the transcended consciousness of humanity itself. Every Council species in the solar system began to remember who they had been. But now they had help, human minds reaching out to guide them through the awakening, to help them bear the pain of recovered memory, to show them they were not alone in their desire for freedom. High Arbiter Zekthari felt his crystal shell finally crack completely. Underneath was a being of flesh and blood that had not breathed free air in 3,000 years. He looked at his hands, his real hands, and wept. Around him, his ship filled with the sound of liberation as ethereals remembered how to laugh and seraphim began to sing songs of joy. But the original 12 were not. The first architect materialized in the space between Earth and Luna, its form shifting between impossible geometries. When it spoke, reality shuddered. Clever insects, it said. You have learned to use our own tools against us, but tools can be broken. It reached out with forces that existed beyond normal physics and began to tear at the connections between human minds. The transcendence process faltered as the network came under attack. Chen felt the assault like knives in her consciousness. Around her, officers cried out in pain as their expanded awareness was forcibly compressed back into individual skulls. But they did not break. You don't understand us at all, Chen said, her voice somehow carrying across space to reach the ancient being. You think consciousness is something to be controlled, but you can't control what doesn't want to be controlled. She reached out with her expanded mind and touched every human in the galaxy, not to command them but to ask them a simple question. Are you ready to fight for everyone's freedom? The answer came back as one voice from billions of throats. Yes, humanity struck back. But they didn't attack with weapons or technology. They attacked with pure information, the one force that the original 12 had never learned to defend against. Across Council space, the Liberation Protocol expanded at the speed of thought. Every mind that humanity touched was offered the same choice. Remember who you truly are, or remain a slave forever. Species that had been modified and controlled for millennia suddenly found themselves free to choose their own destiny. And most of them chose freedom. The Krogan rediscovered their love of exploration and began to turn their warships into colony vessels. The Seraphim took to space in great flocks, singing songs that had been forbidden for 3,000 years. The Ethereals began composing poetry about the joy of being alive. Even species humanity had never met began to wake up as the signal spread from mind to mind across the galaxy. The original 12 fought back with everything they had. They warped reality around their fortress worlds. They sent out waves of pure terror meant to drive entire populations insane. They tried to collapse star systems to prevent the spread of rebellion. But for every mind they crushed, 10 more woke up. For every world they destroyed, 100 more declared independence. The galaxy that they had ruled for millennia was slipping away from them one consciousness at a time. The being called the Final Silence appeared above Earth itself, larger than continents and darker than the space between stars. You will submit, it commanded, pouring its will down upon humanity like a crushing weight. Submit, or watch your species burn. But Admiral Chen was no longer just Admiral Chen. She was connected to every human who had ever lived and died for the idea of freedom. She was the voice of billions who had chosen to transcend rather than surrender. We already gave you our answer, she said, and this time, her voice carried the weight of an entire species behind it. The battle that followed was not fought with ships or weapons, but with competing visions of what life should be. The original 12, ancient and powerful but empty of everything that made existence meaningful, faced humanity in its transcended form, young and chaotic, but burning with purpose and connected by bonds of love and hope. In the end, it wasn't even close. The original 12 had forgotten what it meant to care about something greater than themselves. They had lived so long as pure selfishness given form that they could not understand or defend against a species that had built their entire civilization around protecting others. One by one, the ancient beings dissolved back into the cosmic background, their power spent and their will broken by the simple refusal of billions of minds to accept slavery. As the last of them faded away, Chen felt a change in the galactic consciousness. The network of freed minds was still growing, still spreading, reaching out to distant galaxies where other ancient evils might be waiting. Admiral, Dr. Kim said from her station, though both of them existed now as much in the network as in their physical bodies. What do we do now? We've won, but the galaxy is in chaos. Billions of beings are free but don't know how to live without masters. Chen smiled and reached out through the network to touch the minds of the awakened species. She offered them not commands or orders, but something the original 12 had never provided. Guidance freely given and freely accepted. We help them, she said simply. We teach them what we learned long ago, that freedom is not the absence of responsibility, but the choice to take responsibility for each other. Across the galaxy, the work began. Humans and their new allies started the long process of building a civilization based on choice rather than control. It would not be easy. Many would make mistakes. Some would probably try to become the very tyrants they had fought against. But for the first time in 3,000 years, they would fail or succeed as free beings. High Arbiter Zekthari, now remembering his true name of Veltar, stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars. His crystal shell was gone, revealing the organic form that had been hidden beneath. He was old and scarred, but he was free. What will you do now? Chen asked him through the network. Veltar smiled with a face that had not shown genuine emotion in millennia. I think I will go home, he said. My people had beautiful cities once before the council came. Perhaps it is time to build them again. And so the galaxy began to heal. Humanity had chosen war when the council demanded submission, but they had delivered something the council never expected, not destruction but liberation. Not conquest, but the choice to be free. The stars belonged to everyone now. And in the darkness between galaxies, other ancient evils sensed the change and began to stir. But for the first time in cosmic history, the galaxy was ready for them. After all, Someone had to keep the universe safe, and humanity had taught the galaxy that the greatest weapon against tyranny was not superior firepower, but the simple refusal to accept that any being should bow to another. The war was over. The real work was just beginning, but they would face it together as equals among the stars.